Okay, anyway, welcome everybody. Just as people are joining, I'll say hello. It's really great to have Nicki back with us, Nicki Little, and she gave a talk for us a few weeks ago, and she was walking across England to raise money for Loros. And so this is going to be a bit of a different talk, and Nicki's going to share with us about her experiences as volunteering as a Gamesmaker for the London Olympics,
Yes.
which, gosh, it was 2012. Anyway, welcome also to those of you who are watching on YouTube when we mention.
So a bit of background, really. I call myself a serial volunteer. Most years I end up volunteering for various charities and various organisations, including choirs and sports organisations. But certainly since 2012, I think every year I've volunteered for at least one sporting event, except this year, of course, because I really got the taste for it in 2012 with volunteering for the Olympics and the Paralympics. I was absolutely determined that I was going to be a volunteer at the London Olympics, having been to the Manchester Commonwealth Games in 2002, I think it was 2002. And we went to 2 or 3 events at the Commonwealth Games, and at the Commonwealth Games, a lot of play was made of the fact that the volunteers had really made the games. I think it was the first time really that volunteers really asserted themselves and became a sort of key part of an event. And so I was absolutely determined, once London got the prize of hosting the Olympics in 2012, that I was going to be part of that. So I duly applied, and I was called for an interview at the sports centre at Warwick University, which is actually in Coventry. So that's not too far from me. So I set off nevertheless incredibly early, because I thought I would get there and I would sit in the Student Union cafe or something and really prepare myself for the interview and have some breakfast and generally, you know, turn up all calm and prepared. And then it turned out that being an almighty smash, an almighty accident on the ring road in Coventry, and I ended up sitting in this tailback for what felt like hours and hours and hours. It was at least an hour, if not 2 hours. And I thought, well, that's the end of my Olympic Games. I'm obviously not going to get to this interview in time. But of course, it turned out that some of the interviewers had also been held up in this, the after effects of this smash. So anyway, when I got there, they just said, fine, you just get the next slot for an interview. And I can't remember exactly what they asked at the interview, but they usually ask you why you've applied, and, you know, can you give us an example of where you took the initiative, and can you give me an example of this, that and the other. Anyway, I was accepted as a result of this interview, and I was assigned to what was called spectator services, which were the people, we were the teams of volunteers who interacted with the spectators. So meeting and greeting spectators, telling them where to get to wherever they wanted to go. And more specifically, within the spectator services, I was assigned to what was called mobility services. And I'll tell you a bit more about what that meant later on. So I was also incredibly lucky. I realised even more in hindsight than I did at the time that I was assigned to the Olympic Park, the new Olympic Park that was being created near Stratford in London. As you'll remember, there were lots and lots of different venues that were being used for different sports, and some people were out at, was it called Downey something or other, where the sailing took place, and by the sea, and some people stuck at the Excel or at Horse Guards Parade where the beach volleyball was on. But I was actually, for the time of the Olympics and for the Paralympics, I was actually on the Olympic Park at Stratford. We had to go down to London, so I went down for the interview, then we had to go down for 3 lots of training. There was training, just sort of general rah, 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 this is all going to be fantastic, isn't it going to be wonderful sort of training. And then there was role specific training. So we had a day's training about what our role was going to be about in spectator services. And then we had a day's venue specific training, so that we went, in our case, to the Olympic Park. And it was only about a week, it felt like, before, from what I recall, before the Olympic Games were due to start. And there was still lots of building going on. You know, it really didn't look finished at all. You wondered how on earth they were going to complete time for the games. But we were given a guided tour of the park, which didn't really make much sense, to be quite honest, until you were actually there for the games themselves. We also had to collect uniform. I managed to tag that onto one of the trips down, because otherwise it would have been 5 visits to London before we even started the games. So went and picked up our uniform for the Olympics, and then there was a separate pickup time towards the end of the Olympic Games to get your uniform for the Paralympics. Now, I must say, we did very well for the uniform that we were given. And people sometimes say, well, did you get to keep the uniform? Well, yes, we did get to keep the uniform, because it's really not much use to anybody else, or to return it after the games. And it was something that we got to keep as a keepsake, because, I mean, I'm not complaining, but, you know, you don't get any expenses, any money towards these sort of voluntary activities. Not surprising. I mean, they just really couldn't afford to sub-ed people, but you don't get any money towards your travel or your accommodation or so on. So to get a bit of uniform to keep that you can occasionally wear is pretty good. So I think you can see I got a cap. I hope you can see me. We got 2 shirts for the Olympics. We got this jacket, reasonably waterproof jacket. We got 2 pairs of beige trousers, 2 pairs of socks. We even got some shoes, which I'm not wearing at the moment, but I still use occasionally for going to Zumba and yoga. Still wear them. They're getting a bit tatty by now. We got a nice little bag that we had to carry stuff around in, because we were not allowed to take anything else, any rucksacks or any other sort of bags onto the site. And there was nowhere to store luggage anyway. So really you had to put everything that you needed. Hope you can see this. I can't see exactly what I'm showing you. In this bag and carry it around with you. It naturally can be a shoulder bag or a little rucksack, so you can change the straps. We got a water bottle, which I put in my dishwasher and managed to ruin. A pen, as you can see there, a little umbrella, and each day we got little gifts as well during the games, and so that's one of the badges, one of the pin badges that we got, and all manner of little booklets. The best thing was, and I realise now I've forgotten to put this on, was that we were given a Swatch watch, an actual red Swatch watch for the Olympic Games, a genuine Swiss watch with Gamesmaker, and I'll get it for the second half of the talk and show you. And that was, you know, I found that very prestigious. And then when we were queuing up to get the uniform for the Paralympic Games, I said jokingly, well, I hope we're going to get another Swatch watch. And duly we did. We got a purple Swatch watch for the Paralympic Games. So that was rather good. For the Paralympic Games, we got another cap with the Paralympic Games logo on it, which I've given to one of my nephews. We got shirts which have the Paralympic, this is the Paralympic logo. So I'd had 2 Olympic Games with the Olympic Games logo on. Then we got 2 shirts for the Paralympic Games. I have to say the material is not really very nice. It was too sweaty and hot when it was hot, and it's not very warm when it's cold, but anyway, never mind. And then rather cleverly, we didn't get a new jacket for the Paralympic Games, but we did get, it says rummaging in her pocket, a set of things that we could stick on with Velcro over the Olympic Games logos, so that the jacket became a jacket for the Paralympic Games. So they'd really thought it through very well indeed. I say we ended up with quite a bit of kit to take away. Not that long in advance of the games, we were sent a timetable for our shifts, and I must say, when I first saw my timetable, I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. It was 5 days a week, of 5 days out of 7 in the week you had a shift, and the morning shift started at 6 o'clock in the morning and went through till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the afternoon shift went from 2 till 10. And I thought it was absolutely ridiculous expecting us to get there by 6 o'clock in the morning. But I did realise once we started that it was necessary for us to get there for 6, because the gates opened at 7, 7:30, I think. And so we had to get there, be briefed for the day, and get ourselves sort of sorted out before the game. The gates were open to the spectators. And yes, it was an early start from where I was staying, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But it was actually really quite enjoyable in the end, with the weather being so lovely to get there at 6 o'clock in the morning. The evening shift was allegedly 2 till 10, but the very first evening they said, oh, can any of you possibly stay on till later, because there'll be people leaving events later on. And in fact, there were events finishing around about midnight, the basketball I seem to remember. So if you then needed to look after people leaving that event and see them out of the Olympic Park at around midnight, it meant you hadn't really finished sorting out and packing stuff away until about 1 o'clock. I said I was quite happy to do that as long as I could still get back to where I was staying, which turned out to be possible because, I don't know if you remember, they put on a lot of extra tube trains. There was a lot of extra transport operating during the Games and the Paralympic Games. So I was quite happy to stay on and do that. I can, I think, just show you quickly my rota. So that was the rota from the Paralympic Games, which is, as you remember, came after the Olympic Games. So you can see by then they'd actually officially put in 2 p.m. in the afternoon till 1 a.m. in the morning for
Nicki,
the afternoon.
Nicki, do you mean to screen share?
Right, thank you. Am I not screen sharing at the moment at all?
No.
Right, hang on. I think I've now closed down Zoom. Thank you for telling me.
So you're still engaged on here, Nicki. It's just getting the slide deck up.
Hang on. So can you see the PowerPoint before I've actually started running it?
No, it's still on your head and shoulders at the moment.
Okay. Right, I've forgotten how to find slide share screen now.
It's the green box at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, got it. Great. Okay, there we go. Right, can you see a timetable?
Yes, we can.
Jolly good. Okay. So now you can see that timetable where actually for the Paralympic Games I had all afternoon shifts. Thank you for telling me, Peter. 2 till 1 every time. So they by then acknowledged that it was going to be necessary for us to stay until 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I will now try to go into the slides. How's that? Can you see the beginning of the PowerPoint? I haven't actually gone to the first page yet. Is that okay?
It's still on the shifts page, Nicki.
Is it? Right. How's that?
Yep, that's back to the slide deck. Good.
How's that?
Perfect.
Black screen with a bit of red writing and a bit of white writing on it.
Yep.
Okay, right. Sorry about that. Okay. I mentioned accommodation, and we didn't get any financial help. We didn't get any practical help either with finding accommodation. And I thought about staying with my stepdaughter in Finchley, but it turned out it would take just about as long to get from Finchley to Stratford as it would have taken to get from Leicester to Stratford every day. So a friend of mine was staying he was going down for some of the games as a spectator, and he was staying with his sister. I think it was in Walthamstow. So I asked whether he could ask his sister if she knew anybody else in that sort of area who might be able to accommodate me. Anyway, she asked somebody who asked somebody, and I ended up staying with an absolutely delightful family in about 3 stops from Stratford. It was just South Woodford, that's right, South Woodford. So I stayed with them during the Olympic Games, and I could tell, I think they, like me, were rather cynical about the whole thing to start with, and they weren't really particularly interested in the Games. But once I think I got enthusiastic and I was telling them about sort of all that was happening, they became quite enthusiastic too, and I have a suspicion that they were saying, "Ooh, we're hosting a Gamesmaker," and telling them about it. So that was really, really nice. And then at the end of the Olympics, they actually said to me, are you coming back for the Paralympics, and please come and stay with us for the Paralympic Games as well. So I was back and stayed with them for the Paralympic Games, and it was absolutely delightful. They've got two sons who were early 20s, 21, 22, who came and went, you know, as lads at that age do. So we just had a little system whereby the last person in removed the little message from the floor in the hall and locked the door. So it didn't matter what time I came and went, they were quite accommodating to my coming and going like that. So that all worked out really well, and we ended up as friends. I say at the end of it, it was really delightful. That really added something to the experience. As I say, cynical. I was very cynical. I was cynical, I think, like a lot of us were here, about how the games were going to go. And I don't know if you remember the first couple of days, things went wrong with the bus going the wrong place and then playing the wrong Korean national anthem and all that sort of thing. And you just thought, oh God, typical, here we go. This is going to be a right shambles, and it's going to be embarrassingly dreadful. But and the first 2 days that I did at the Olympic Park, I wasn't really very happy. I had next to nothing to do. I was just standing around by the aquatic centre with nothing really happening because there was no events there for the first couple of days. And it was very boring, and the weather wasn't that good, and I just thought, this is not really going to be much fun. But as it got underway, and as it got gathered momentum, and as the weather got better, and as the Brits were doing well with medals, and the whole country really did get behind it, it really got better and better. And it was one of the best things in the end that I've ever done. Really was absolutely fantastic. And you were really appreciated by everybody, really. I mean, Trish, it seemed they hadn't heard of the expression Gamesmaker, and I must say, when we were told we were going to be Gamesmakers, and I thought it was really naff, you know, really sort of cheesy. But in the end, I do think it was a really good name for us, because I think people said that the volunteers, not me personally, but the volunteers as a whole, really helped to make the games the success that it was. People were incredibly positive about us, and when I was walking to the tube at 5 o'clock in the morning, or coming back in the evening, or on the train on the tube, people would actually say to me, you know, thank you very much for what you're doing, and you're doing a great job, and it's really great and everything. So yeah, it was just a fantastic experience, and I say very positive. And one of the best things I've done, and since then I've done several more events like Commonwealth Games and Special Olympics, and I did go to the Paralympics in Rio, but that will do for another day. Okay, we'll start on the slides now. So this is all very eerie when I can't hear anybody. So does anybody want to ask anything at this stage? Please unmute yourself and ask a question if you would like to. No? Okay. I'll flow on then. Okay, okay. All right, Peter?
Yes, I'm here.
Are you okay? Everything all right?
Yeah. Yes,
you can now see my slides. Right. Okay. Right. So there we go. That's sometimes you can, in fact, there definitely you can ignore the times on these slides, because I think I'd forgotten to reset my camera when I came back from somewhere exotic. So as you can probably guess, that wasn't at 23:56 at night. It was sometime in the morning. So that's me standing at on the entrance, the approach in from Stratford tube station, going down to the Olympic stadium. I think you'll recall that the stadium, the whole Olympic Park, was built on an area which had been dreadful wasteland. It had been really sort of neglected, and it was, you know, full of scrubland and a very rundown area of London. And really how they transformed it into this most amazing park was fantastic. It was a very large area. I remember one lady who arrived and said, well, where is the Olympic Stadium? I said, you know, it's in front of you, madam, it's down there. And then she says, well, why is it so far away? So you haven't seen anything yet. You're not going, at least you're not going to basketball, which was right at the other end of the park. Somebody else said, why is the Olympic Park so big? I said, because, well, it'd be very cramped otherwise, wouldn't it? And given how many thousands of people are coming, you know, it would be, if it wasn't this big, then it would be very crowded, and and it is a sporting event, so perhaps it's quite a good idea to be walking around. Anyway, you can see quite a few games makers behind me there. There's quite a posse of games makers walking down towards the Olympic Stadium. You can see on the left, that's a bit of the aquatic centre. This here, this sticking out from this, and I'll say a bit more about the aquatic centre later on. And then you can see a tiny bit of the orbit, which was the sculpture done by Anish Kapoor. And again, I'll say a bit about that later on. So there you can see me in my full uniform, including the little shoes. and my Olympics watch. And then we all obviously had to wear ID all the time. We were carefully checked when we went in and all our stuff screened. We had to go through security like anybody arriving at the stadium. I don't know if you remember, but the security was supposed to be done by G4S, and then they just weren't equipped to do it at all. So I think they hoped that they'd enlist lots of students, but they weren't able to do so. And even when they did enlist students, students aren't very keen to get up at first thing in the morning or stay late at night. So in the end, the army came in and did most of the security, and they were really, really excellent. It was I felt much more reassured having the army around than a load of students or young people working for G4S. Another thing that I thought, I must say, I was very worried about happening with it. I just thought there's sure to be some sort of security incident, you know, there'll be an explosion somewhere or a bomb set on the park, but thankfully none of my fears on that count were realised. So there you go, you see the Olympic Stadium. I think it's a beautiful building. It's now a football ground for a team that I can't remember, but one of the London football grounds, football teams eventually took it over. This is the Spectator Services, Mobility Services team assembling one morning, not 22:38 at night, obviously, but sometime in the morning. So we would assemble and be briefed each day in this hub. The people briefing us, the team leaders, were actual paid employees, but all the rest of us were, all the people that you can see there were volunteers like myself. So the mobility services team, we had 3 different jobs that we could do. So one was to, there were 3 or 4 places where people who arrived could hire wheelchairs or buggies like these, sort of mobility aids. So you could be working in one of these tents, or I think they were, I can't remember exactly what they were, but anyway, sort of cabins, and hiring out mobility aids. So that was one of the jobs. Another job was actually to push people in wheelchairs to and from, say, where they arrived. You might push them up to the door of a venue, but you only up to a certain point. So that was the second job, was pushing people in wheelchairs, and then you would collect them afterwards, or somebody would collect them afterwards and take them back to the exit from the park. Then the third job was being on the mobility buggies, either actually driving the buggy, as you'll see in a minute, or, and you saw on this sort of the photo for today, or working the, well, like bus stops, buggy stops around the park. And that job, that with doing the sort of the, if you like, mini bus service around the park, or the buggy service around the park, was what I really liked doing. I thought the other 2 were rather boring, really. So I always, once I'd realised that was what I wanted to do, I would get there as early as possible each shift, so that I got first dibs on what job I was going to do. So you can see as they're sort of getting, well, chatting in advance of the briefing, it gives you some idea of the sort of mix of people. There was a real mix of people in the teams. We had people of all ages, and we had quite people of different nationalities. I'm really glad to say there were some disabled people. There was a lad in a wheelchair. There was a girl with Down syndrome who came with her helper. So it was really very multicultural, sort of multi-age, multi-ethnic team, and which was, you know, made it very enjoyable as well. That's the briefing happening. So that's she was an Irish girl whose name I now can't remember 8 years on, but briefing us for each day. So she'd say, you know, what events were going to be on, when there was likely to be a rush of people arriving or a rush of people leaving, and when we needed to be ready where, and any sort of particular incidents that had happened the previous day or that we had to be aware of that might be happening the day coming up, any VIPs who might be coming, and so on. So I say we'd have this briefing with this girl, and then we'd go off and do our shifts. So as I mentioned, this is what I liked doing the best, I have to say, was driving this golf buggy. it was a bit cramped for me with my legs, but anyway, I sort of got used to that. So we had a specific route that we had to follow going around the park. We couldn't just ride around willy-nilly and take people where they wanted. So there was a sort of clockwise bus route going basically around the perimeter of the park, with designated stops, and we would drive from one stop to the next, and there would be people from our team as well, sort of marshalling people on and off the buggy, seeing how much room there was. And obviously if your buggy was full, you just carried on, and then you hope that the people who needed to get on could get on the next buggy that came round. There were buggies like this, and then there were buggies with which were wheelchair accessible, so they could take fewer people sitting down, but there was a platform which where you could wheel a wheelchair on and off and anchor a wheelchair. So we had to learn how to do that as well. We didn't have that much training in how to drive these things, but it's really not that difficult once you've got used to it, really. I'm surprised I haven't got the window thing up at the front here, especially without my glasses on, because you obviously sometimes you get insects flying and bashing you in the face. So as I said, this was supposed to be for people with mobility difficulties, so either people with permanent disabilities who couldn't walk around the extensive park, and I was amazed by how many people there were, people who turned up having broken their leg or broken their ankle or whatever, and who couldn't get themselves around the park and get on. And we were not supposed to take anybody else. So if you had a disabled person or a person with a broken leg, you were not supposed to take their family as well. But I'm afraid what I used to do was say, well, you can get on, but if we suddenly come across 7 people with broken legs, then you'll all have to get off and just leave your space to the people who really do need to use the services. And people were generally very good about that. Obviously, when I did the same thing for the Paralympics, and there were a lot more, by definition, really a lot more disabled people around then. So that was good. The one time we didn't tell people to get off was when Torvill and Dean wanted a lift. I wasn't actually driving, but I was on with somebody else, and Torvill and Dean wanted to get on. Well, you're not going to tell Torvill and Dean to get lost and say that they're not disabled and they can't get on the buggy. So we did actually give them a lift. But it was like being a taxi driver, and you'd say who you'd had in the back of your buggy. I had, right, chap who used to be leader of the Liberal Democrats, and I've now forgotten his name, but anyway, he was very good and very friendly. There's lots of different people. You did celebrity spotting, so most days I reckon I saw about 3 or 4 celebrities, not necessarily on my buggy, but it was really good fun seeing people like Chris Akabusi, and did see quite a few well-known athletes and well-known presenters as well as we went round. There we go. So as you can see, that's just a close-up from the previous picture, and you can get an idea of how busy it got us as we went on. We were also told that we're not supposed to do guided tours. We weren't supposed to be telling people, giving people guided tours. We were just supposed to drive these buggies and let people on off the buggies. But you can't just drive and not say anything. And you picked up interesting information, I felt, about the park. So I did used to tell people about the various buildings that we were seeing as we went round. I think you can see how happy I was. I just really, honestly, I was in my element. I really enjoyed the whole thing, and as I say, it just got on a roll really, and enjoyed it more and more as it went on. You can see my Olympic watch there and my accreditation as well. Okay. This was the canteen. We had this massive canteen, which could be used by all the, not just the volunteers, but there were quite a lot of paid people as well, sort of people for like security services, and actually some of the stewards doing a very similar job to us, but they were paid people. The police would eat in there, the army would eat in there as well. I say the army who were doing security, people working on security. The police, I'll say a bit more about later on, but the police what they did was have different services from around the country there for sort of 2 or 3 days at a time. So most of the police forces had some time at the Olympic Games and really enjoyed it. A bit like the Games as a whole, the food the first 2 or 3 days was pretty awful, really. They hadn't really got themselves into gear, and there was not much choice, and things ran out. Or, you know, there was like a sausage roll, a sausage, or a sausage casserole, and the choice wasn't very good. But as the Games went on, it really got very good indeed. They did. We got tokens, we got vouchers that we could use for the meals. I got a bit fed up with those Harvest Gold, I think they're called, or something or other, energy bars. We got those all the time, but on the other hand, it was quite good when you got there that early in the morning. You know, you didn't want, I didn't want breakfast before I set off, so it's quite handy to have those energy bars there. In the, yeah, you can see one here at the top. They had big screen, well, fairly large screens up in the canteen as well, so we could watch what was going on the screens. And I particularly remember the night, you know, the Golden Saturday, when there were 3 gold medals in close succession, and I thought, I'm just not leaving this canteen until I've seen the final event and to see the final gold medal. So it was really good fun, sort of being able to watch there what was going on. It was very weird, actually. You could, yeah, 2 minutes I've seen. Yeah,
that's it.
Okay.
Nicki, thanks.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll just finish this slide. So you could see what was going on the screen, but then you could hear the noise coming from the Olympic Stadium, which was, even from outside, was absolutely incredible. Really, the racket of people cheering as the events were going on in the Olympic Stadium. All the time of the Olympics, I didn't get inside one venue. Our accreditation and our job did not involve us going inside any of the venues, and I didn't get in any at all. During the Paralympics, because I got chatting to a guy who was, this is a whole other story, but who was looking after the Burkina Faso team, he managed to get me a pass into the copper box to see some goalball. So that was in the whole sort of 5 weeks or so that I was there. That was the only time that I got inside one of the venues and actually saw something going on. I did get inside the Olympic Stadium a few years later when I went to do the World Athletics, but during the actual Olympics, I didn't get inside. I'm not complaining at all, because it was just fantastic even being outside and hearing what was going on. But people said, oh, you know, did you get to see such and such? Answer, no, we didn't get to see anything live at all. We only got to see it like everybody else on the screens. I've just remembered who I had in my buggy now, Ming Campbell, that's who I was trying to think of. Yeah, so I had a good chat with him, yeah. Okay, so I said I'd just show you, right, here we go. Those were the 2 watches. So the red one, yeah, that's funny. That's the Olympics one with the Olympics logo on, you can see up there, and Gamesmaker written on the strap. And then, and unfortunately that one's died and they can't mend it, so it doesn't tell the time anymore. But the Paralympics one, which is reverse really, purple with red on rather than red with purple on, and Gamesmaker written on it, is still going strong. And it's got the Paralympics logo on it. And I was just going to look up what those 3 things are called, but I've forgotten. But those were from the Paralympics logo. And then I just said, as I said, there's these little shoes that are actually very comfortable, and I'm still using for yoga and so on. The only thing is that they've got indented soles, so you get all the pebbles in them, and which is a bit silly really, and even worse things than pebbles. So it's best to wear them indoors. But anyway, so there we go. Right, I will now try and go back to the slides. There we go. And I'll also switch off my there we go. Okay. Right, are we back to the slide I was on before? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
You can see, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Right, so there was the canteen. Okay, so we'll go on to a view of the stadium. As I mentioned, the stadium is now being used by one of the London football teams. I think it's a really beautiful design. I can't, to be honest, remember who designed it. but it was built, the area that was created from which the Olympic Park was created was actually a series of islands. Well, there were 2 rivers running through it, and the Olympic Stadium technically is sitting on an island. There were bridges across, different lettered bridges. I think you can see there A, so there was bridge A, bridge B, the C. So it was actually on an island. And this is one of the screens where they actually showed what was going on, or they showed the Olympic flames outside when the games were actually happening. Here you can see one of our buggies coming along on its route, and some of the flowers, of which I will say more anon. So this is I think this is the right time now. I think I'd adjusted my camera by this stage. So this is the stadium again at twilight when the lights were coming on, and you can see, I think it just gives you an idea. I think it's a really beautiful building. It's really well designed, but also this was an area called the Spotty Bridge. So that was these circles were all in that, sort of that spongy material that they use for children's playgrounds nowadays. And children had, I think you can see a lad here, for example, had great fun, you know, jumping from one red circle to the next red circle, or from yellow to yellow, or whatever. That's not there anymore. That was for the period of the games. But yeah, that was the Spotty Bridge. And we're not supposed to ride our buggies across there because they would damage the surface of the Spotty Bridge. I'm really pleased with this one. I have to confess, it was not at 4:32 in the morning, but it was probably at 6:32 in the morning when I'd arrived for the morning shift. And as you can see, the sun was just sort of starting to catch on the upper edges of the Olympic Stadium. And I like this as well. This is the Olympic flame, the Olympic torch, showing on the screen at that time in the morning. So I say I'm rather pleased with that picture. It's just a shame that this got the wrong time on. And this will be a sort of proper security guard who's actually probably a G4S chap actually, who's there guarding the Olympic Stadium at that time in the morning. This was the velodrome. This was up far reaches of the Olympic Park actually. And this has been retained. This is still there in operation. This is a permanent building and it's used quite a lot by, well, either by cycle clubs, or you can go and you can book a session there and actually go around the velodrome. I have been in since then, and you could see people sort of say going around the track. And the nickname for the velodrome was the Pringle, because it's got this sort of curvy roof, a bit like a Pringle. And the interesting fact, or one of the interesting facts about the Pringle and about this roof here, which was stained wooden roof, is that they used, believe it or not, beetroot to stain the roof to give it this colour. So that was something which I included in my not guided tours of the Olympics Park when I was driving people around. This was the very furthest point of the park if you came in at the main gate, and this is was the basketball arena in here, and that was an inflatable building. So that was apparently the largest inflatable something or other, whether it's the largest inflatable building or the largest inflatable sports venue or whatever. Anyway, it was very large and got sort of basketball courts inside it. And the idea was that it was going to be deflated at the end, dismounted at the end, and taken to Rio for the Olympics and Paralympics 4 years later. But I don't think that happened. I certainly wasn't aware of it being there when I went to Rio for the Paralympics. Okay, I kind of think it's an attractive building and rather nicely done. Looks a bit like meringue or something. This was where the BBC were operating from, so they'd use these shipping containers. So again, this was a temporary part of the Olympic Park. So they'd use these shipping containers to create the BBC studios. And I don't know if you remember, you'd see people being interviewed sitting on couches in the evening, well, during the day and in the evenings, and they were in this indoor studio, or occasionally here in this outdoor studio, and you can actually see there's somebody there. Presumably conducting an interview, and a British flag. So perhaps a Brit had just won another medal and was being interviewed about it. it gives you an idea here of how crowded it got, how busy it got, and of the lovely sunshine that we had for most of the games. You can just see one of our buggies there trying to make its way through them. And sometimes it was incredibly difficult to get through here because it was so crowded. And I remember one time Nicki Campbell was there doing some sort of vox pop thing actually in this area, and it was just impossible to get through without knocking a load of people over. But that was part of our route, and that was the way we had to go. So you had to sort of, I think we had little horns that we could hoot every now and then, but they sounded a bit aggressive, so you tried to avoid doing that. I was doing my Not the Guided tour one time, and I said, well, that's where the BBC studios are. And this lady said, how do you know? Well, I know because you can see that that's what's going on in there. And we'd been told that that's where the BBC studios were. As I said, there were 2 rivers. I think it's the River Lee is one of them, and I have to say I've forgotten the name of the other one, running through the Olympic Park. And this was where they had these giant screens either end of this rather peculiar construction in the river. Again, that was a temporary construction. And then people, as you can see here, between events that they were there for, and you could have access to the park without having access to any actual venue, any particular event. So some people would come in and sit here and watch on the big screens what was going on. I particularly remember the Sunday of the tennis final, if you remember, when Andy Murray was playing Federer, and so we drove along. Yeah, our route was somewhere about here. So every time we went past, you'd ask people here what the score was to see how Andy Murray was getting on. And actually on my day off on the Friday, I had been to my first ever visit to Wimbledon, and I'd seen the 2 semi-finals. I don't remember, there was that amazing 3-4 hour match between Federer and Del Potro, which really Del Potro should have won. And then there was Andy Murray beat Djokovic on the Friday. And I said, if Andy Murray and Federer play on Sunday like they played today, Andy Murray will win. And of course he did. And so we were told by people here what was going on. This is actually, can you see where I'm pointing with the click with the pointer? This is where the, good. Hockey was going on. So this was again a temporary building, but they had a hockey pitch here, that one of those strange pitches with water sort of in the surface of the ground. And so and this was on the left here, the international press were in here. And I think that building's still being used. That's right, that was a permanent building and that's being used. This was temporary. The tennis and the hockey buildings was a temporary building there. So generally, actually, this will give you some idea. So our route would come up here, and then we'd go past them and around across a bridge at the back of there. And the velodrome and the basketball were up sort of somewhere around here at the far end of the park. I have been back once or twice since the end of the games, and it was difficult to recognise exactly where some of these things had been. They've restructured the park to some extent, but as I hinted, there's some of the buildings are still there, intimated, and some of the buildings are still there and some of them are still being used, which is really great. Okay, and this is another example of what is being used. So these were, you can see the flags here, the athletes' village, part of the athletes' village, so being occupied by athletes from different countries. I'm going to show my ignorance here, but that could be Holland, couldn't it? And this could be Belgium, I think, and so on. So they, as you can see, would hang their flags out to show which nationality they were from. And these flats are now, some of them were sold, but some of them have been retained for key workers. So there's teachers and nurses and social workers actually can live in these, the housing that was built for the Olympic Village for the athletes during the actual Olympics. So, I mean, very, very handy for them. You know, they didn't have very far to go between where they were being accommodated and the events that were going on, rather than some games having to be shipped in buses from wherever they were staying to where they are now, where they were going to perform. I said you saw this bit of the aquatics centre. This is the aquatics centre. So the main entrance was up there on to the left, and people came in down this main approach with the aquatics centre on their left. The aquatic centre was designed by a woman whose name I've forgotten, who was quite a famous Middle Eastern architect, I think known for being rather stroppy, who actually has since died, sadly, but she designed this beautiful aquatic centre, which was meant to look like a whale tail. So this was the whale tail sort of part of it. And for the period of the Olympics, they built on this extra bit here to give extra seating. So there was seating all in here, but that was removed again at the end of the Olympics. And I have been to an event in the aquatic centre since the Olympics happened, so that's being used for events, and you can go and swim there. If you want to go and swim in the Olympic stadium, you can go and swim in the Olympic stadium. This again, the river running down here, and this gives you an idea of some of the flowers. I'll say a bit more about the flowers later on, but the flowers were absolutely stunning. There's agapanthus here, and yeah, lupins, are they? I don't know. Anyway, but really stunning flower arrangements, flower displays throughout the games. There we go. So that gives you a bit more of a view of the flowers. So what they did was, for those of you who didn't manage to go, was that the flowers were as well organised by geographical area. So you'd get an area that was Australia, and an area that was Europe, and an area that was North America. And as you can see, it's very much sort of using wildflowers. And apparently there were teams of gardeners out every night during the night, you know, deadheading and walking and looking after these flowers. And they were absolutely stunning. They were really, really beautiful, really vast sways here, over here as well. You can see that gives you an idea of the Olympics being on this island and the bridges across, but flowers under here as well, and beautiful thing, beautiful scene. You can also here see this orbit, which was this sculpture designed by Anish Kapoor. And you could go up the orbit and walk down again, I seem to remember. Since then, they've apparently added a slide so that you can slide down it. It was quite expensive to get in, and people were queuing a long time to get in. I seem to remember it was something like 20 quid to go in and come down again down the orbit. But that one perk we did get, one morning we were allowed, they asked if any of us wanted to go up the orbit, and we were able to go up for free. So I went up into the top of the orbit there. But again, that's still there, and that's seen from quite a distance, you know, and it's the red sort of glows as well. So that was, I think, a good addition. So we would go round past the centre, round past the orbit, and then back out and come back this way. There's another view of the flowers, as I say, absolutely stunning. And again, just absolutely beautiful, really, really beautiful. Now, I mentioned that the police were, different police forces were there during the games, and they, I remember I asked one policeman from Bradford, he was from the Bradford force, whether he was enjoying it, and he said it was absolutely fantastic. He said, because where I work, when I'm at work, normally everybody hates us, but here everybody loves us. Everybody thought the police were great, and of course all the foreigners loved seeing the police with their you know, the tall helmets, and they loved seeing the police sitting on police horses, because there were some horses there and the police would be sitting there on the horses. These gang were from Coca-Cola. I was a bit unhappy that Coca-Cola were one of the main sponsors of the games, but anyway, never mind. So they went around doing sort of entertainment for, not just for kids, it was sort of aimed at them, and they did different things and different, what were they called, activations, I think they were called, that they were doing. Anyway, for this one, they were doing gold medal ceremonies. This is like spoof medal ceremonies. So they'd get kids to come up and say, you know, what did you do? And they'd say, the kid would say, you know, I jumped 3 meters or something, or I did whatever. And then they'd put a medal on them and do a sort of spoof medal ceremony. Anyway, this police decided he was going to go up and have a go. So he went up, and they asked him what he'd done. I can't remember what he said, but anyway, and they put a medal on him. And then they started playing Old, you know, by Spandau Ballet. And he started, as you can see, singing along to Gold and dancing along. And they all sort of, you know, were applauding everything. And his mate, another policeman, was standing at the edge here. And somebody said, what's going on here? Asked this policeman what was going on. And the other policeman said, "Madam, we are engaging with the public." So it was just all so sort of friendly and really sort of relaxed. I say the police really must have enjoyed coming down and say being loved by everybody rather than hated. And I think they were put up by all accounts in quite good accommodation, sort of barracks, but sort of quite comfortable. This is difficult to explain without having a picture, but one of the most amazing things I've ever seen was when at exit time, they would have police on horses lined up across the exit, if you like, with the horses face on to the people coming out. 5 or 6 horses across the path. And if the tube station at Stratford was getting too congested, or generally the exits were getting too congested, the horses would, the police on the horses would just turn the horses sideways so that they blocked the path of all the people coming out. And of course, nobody in their right mind would really want to try and duck under a horse. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, just the way that it just calmly and peacefully, they just stopped these crowds and controlled the crowds just by turning the horses sideways to the way that the horses were coming. That's the, I'm going to cry in a minute. That's the stadium on the last night of the Olympics. So as you can see, we were all like Cinderella, sort of waiting outside. We weren't able to go in, but this is when the Olympic fight, the closing ceremony was going on in the Olympic Stadium. You can see the orbit there. The orbit lit up at night, and we were waiting, because then when it finished, we had to be ready with our buggies and wheelchairs and so on to actually take people back out of the Olympic Park. But I think that was it really looks fantastic at night, sort of lit up like that. This was at the Paralympics. My brother, who's a sports professional anyway, he was working for the rugby union at that stage. He now works for the English Cricket Board, and his partner, who used to work for Wasps rugby team. And my niece and my nephew came down for the Paralympics, and the kids were so excited. They didn't, Auntie Nicky's wearing a uniform. They thought it was really fantastic. And this, unfortunately, by the time of the Paralympics, the flowers had started to fade, but nevertheless, it still doesn't look too bad. But during the Olympics, this was a specially designed, designated for photograph spot. Because if you took the photo here, you got all the flowers in the background and the Olympic Stadium in the very background. So they came down and actually, the bastards, I'll show you in a minute, got into we're in the Olympic Stadium. They actually went to events in the Olympic Stadium. So that's me with my baby brother. He's my baby brother, who's 10 years younger than I am. And my niece, Jessie, and my nephew, Max, outside the aquatic centre. And there you can see the Olympic Stadium at the back as well. And that's Jessie and Max with one of the 2 Olympic mascots, whose names I can't remember. And no, I can't remember at the moment. Gosh, getting old. And this must be the velodrome in the background. That's part of the Pringle, the beetroot stained Pringle. And that's my nephew and niece actually in the Olympic Stadium doing the Bolt thing, the Usain Bolt thing. So they had a fantastic time. And actually, because they didn't think that the tickets would sell for the Paralympics, the people who got Paralympic tickets could actually go around all the different venues within. So once they'd seen whatever it was within the Olympic Stadium, they were able to go to the other venues, because the organisers had not expected that the Paralympics would be popular. I mean, there'd not really been much of an event in previous iterations of the event, but because you'll remember, everything just got on such a fantastic roll. In fact, the Paralympics sold out as well in London, and it was impossible to get tickets for the Paralympic events later. And it was actually impossible. A friend of mine's really into gardens and parks and flowers and everything, and I wanted to get him a ticket just to come in to see the park, and I could not get a ticket even just to come into the park. Kept trying, and I couldn't even get a pass for the park, so it sold out. you really knew that the Paralympics had made it when the front page of the Metro every day was a picture of a Paralympic participant, including, you know, the Paralympics, quite severely disabled Paralympic participants, you know, with no arm. There was one amazingly striking picture of a Paralympic athlete with no arms, launching himself off backwards to swim. And I just thought, if that's now on the front page of the Metro, that really shows that. And if you remember, a lot of the British athletes really came into their own for the first time, and Johnny Peacock and so on. And so you really knew that the Paralympics had really turned a corner and become part of mainstream events rather than being sort of sidelined, really, as it goes. I volunteered at the Paralympics as well. Initially, they assigned me to the hockey event, or where the hockey had been, but I asked if I could be back on spectator services and mobility services because I'd enjoyed it so much first time round. It was a bit like the Olympics. The first couple of days were not so good and the weather was not so good. And I seriously thought about saying I didn't want to do it because I did not want to ruin the lovely memories I'd got from the Olympics. But like the Olympics, it just started to get on a roll, really. The momentum really kicked in, and it was sunny, and the atmosphere was absolutely fantastic. And it got some really, really interesting people to talk to who were talking on the buggy. I particularly remember a man from Afghanistan, a refugee with his 2 kids, and he'd come quite a way from the other side of London just to be in the park. They were just going around the park, and he's, you know, I said what were they interested in, and he was sort of just saying how good it was to be here, and he said, again, I'm going to cry, he said, you know, the national sport in Afghanistan is bombing, and he was so happy to be here and to be at this really joyful event in the Olympic Park. I mentioned previously, I reckon I spotted sort of 2 or 3 celebrities every day, from Chris Akabusi to the very famous person, Seb Coe. I saw Seb Coe one time. I saw all manner of people. Brian Moore, the rugby player, managed to point him in the right direction. It was just such a wonderful event, really. And as I say, the legacy, I think, has been very positive in the way of the buildings and the facilities and the park, and also in the sport itself. I mentioned that we got badges and things every day. You'd get some sort of, or a little towel or whatever. If I go back to stop sharing. Okay. So then one of the best things that we got on the last day was they actually gave us a real baton, a real running relay baton. London 2012, I made it happen, Gamesmaker. I don't know if you can see, probably not, it's a bit too shiny. But yeah, there we go. You can't really see it very well. But say we were each given a baton so we can hand on the legacy to the next generation of volunteers and to the next Olympics. So it's very special. Okay, that's it, folks. Well, that's it until
Excellent.
Any questions
Well done.
answered.
Thank you very much, Nicki. Thank you. That was a very poignant talk, wasn't it, really? Because on several counts.
Yes.
And it's especially because, you know, we're now seeing on the news about the inquiry into the Manchester bombing at the concert.
Yeah.
And looking at your photos now of the Olympics in 2012, it was miraculous, wasn't it, that it was also peaceful.
Yes, it was.
And it you know, it was lovely, the story about the police horses and how everything was just such well organized and happy event with people from all over the world.
It was so harmonious.
Thank you very much for sharing those stories.